Good evening, everyone, and welcome to, I believe this is the 48th episode of Every Day is a Story All Its Own, and I am honored and flattered and just so happy to spend the time that we have tonight with Pen Densham, who has returned now for a second time. And thanks for the good responses to his first appearance. Pen has been amazingly gracious. He's written a blurb for the second edition of Every Day is a Story All Its Own. There's true respect here. As you know, a couple weeks ago, I had Richard Haddam on the show, and I had seen Mothman Prophecies 30 times. I just liked that movie, and I respected his work. And it was wonderful then to meet him and have a conversation, and we were on our way to becoming friends. So I said this last time. It was 1991. Kevin Costner was one of those actors that made me want to be an actor. And I mentioned the others, Jeff Goldblum and Tom Hanks and Michael Keaton, Jack Nicholson. But Kevin Costner, I just loved what he did. And he had just had a huge victory with Dances with Wolves as he was taking the reins of being a director and a great visionary and a man who has taken his lumps. I think he's been treated horribly, unfairly. I loved Horizon. I loved it. I don't even want to say it's a fallible film. I don't think it is. It's there, and he's really taken his lumps. And the way Yellowstone ended, I thought was unfortunate. But a man with a very strong vision, and I've always admired that. I have a picture of Kevin over my writing desk, looking down at me, like, "What are you going to write today? What are you going to do today? How are you going to be authentic today, like I am?" But anyway, so this movie, so here we are, all these years later, and Penn wrote this film. So we're going to talk about Robin Hood tonight. We're going to talk about Mal Flanders, which I had not watched prior to him being on the show the first time. Remedied that the week after. A wonderful, wonderful film. Penn takes a much different take with the story, which some people had some thoughts and opinions about, but I think it works wonderful. He is an actor's writer and director. He gets wonderful performances. We're also going to talk tonight about a film that I had seen prior a couple of times, Jonathan Check in Houdini, which is wonderful. A young Mark Ruffalo. He hadn't done much at that time, just some theater practically when he was cast in his film, and he's wonderful. We're also going to talk about Penn's book, Riding the Alligator. Now, keep in mind the first time, if you missed it, go back and watch, because we kind of went beat through the broad strokes of his journey, and then we talked about his art. I do want to quickly at the end go through my slideshow again of his art, and he can kind of just tell you his philosophy. We went one by one, and you really should watch that. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to do our little bumper, our little opening. I'm going to read his bio, bring him on, and we're going to talk about these three films tonight, which I'm just excited to talk shop with someone that I deeply, deeply admire, who's had great success in our business. Pen Densham is an Oscar-nominated screenwriter, director, and producer whose career was mentored by Norman Jewison and launched with the global success of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Through Trilogy Entertainment Group, he produced films such as Backdraft, Mal Flanders, and Houdini. He has executive produced nearly 300 hours of television, including personally reviving The Outer Limits and The Twilight Zone to network runs. He's collaborated with Kevin Costner, Morgan Freeman, and Jodie Foster, and recently executive produced the Oscar-nominated Harriet. Penn also authored the best-selling screenwriting guide, Riding the Alligator, and is a sought-after speaker on creative authenticity. His archives are being acquired by the University of Toronto, cementing his legacy as a multidisciplinary artist who unites photography and film through a shared vision of intuition, renewal, and reverence for life's impermanence. Now, Penn is also a fine art photographer whose work blends realism and abstraction, transforming the natural world into immersive, almost cinematic experiences. Penn has consistently used photography as a way to process emotion and celebrate beauty. His images, entirely created in camera, evoke Monet's lyricism, Pollock's spontaneity, and Freeman Patterson's reverence, yet remain wholly original. Exhibited internationally from Los Angeles to Monaco, his art has been praised for its color, rhythm, and spiritual immediacy. Please welcome back to Every Day is a Story All Its Own, a true master of story, Pen Densham.
Oh, thank you. I don't like being puffed up. I feel like
Oh,
it's really awkward, but because I've had more failures than I've had successes. And I'd much rather people think of me as somebody that keeps stumbling forward until something good happens, as opposed to being a master, because I think those buggers, put us off. I mean, I look
yeah.
at Spielberg now, he's a master. I'm just still, a ham compared with him.
I love that. That humility is one of my favorite traits about you. So tonight, as we go along talking about these successes, feel free to put them in context, or to when Richard Haddam was on, it was great because we learned the optics of what was going on, maybe wasn't going on. So feel free to to really educate. We have a lot of young filmmakers out there, and you did it, and that's a wonderful thing for them to know, but the true past. So let's start with Robin Hood. You had some success with them things. You can talk about these any way you want, as long as you want. How did this come about?
Way back when, I started off making films in Canada with my partner John Watson, and I was too scared to write. I'd written a few things at school when I was 15, got out of school at that age because I thought school would never get better, and really resisted writing anything until I was about 30, when I thought, well, I'm not going to my grave without trying. And there was a chance to write a half-hour drama, which I wrote out of passion, didn't know what I was doing, and it ended up, through more luck than anything else, winning a whole bunch of awards and being reviewed as the best movie of any length being shown on television in Canada. And you're going, no, it's a mistake. I patched this thing together. It's more luck than... and Norman Jewison phoned me up and said, would I like to be mentored by him? All expenses paid, on the making of a movie called Fist, with Sylvester Stallone. And we had a company, we had staff, and I looked at my life and I thought, am I going to make the effort to see if I could actually go bigger than I've ever tried, and at the same time feeling imposter syndrome about actually why he's phoning me up? And I decided I had to do that. And it was a difficult decision. Come to Hollywood, and I believe that they know how to do it. I'm the outside, I'm the church mouse, and very intimidated by the fact that there's all these really professional people and they know the world. And I managed to get to know Stallone a bit and showed Stallone some of our films, and managed to talk Norman Jewison into letting us make a movie about him making the movie. And then I was able to bring my partner John Watson in, and we started patching up other people's movies. And what we started to realize was that Hollywood didn't know everything. And in fact, because we had physically shot our own movies, I would rent the cameras and check them out. We'd freeze the footage till we could afford to process it. We found that if you won awards, people bought your movies because no one knew what was a good movie or a bad movie. And so we managed to get nominated for a couple of Oscars, because if you enter, there's a chance that you can win. And if you never enter, that's 100% failure rate. People say to me, what is your biggest mistake? I say my errors of omission, where I cowered it out, where I felt embarrassed to do something, or where I failed to try. And my errors of commission, where I did embarrass myself, have never hurt me as much as the things I failed to do. So we started to build a reputation patching up other people's movies. We were brought in by Stallone on Rocky II and given the entire film because we were visualizers. My love of photography and things, and they could see that their regular editors were having trouble with the action sequences and the flow of the film, the emotions of the characters in the fights, and they gave us the right to be able to literally use our own techniques, which is finding emotion through reaction and patching the movie together until it became what Stallone really wanted to see, was this incredible orgasm at the end of his story. And we managed to get a couple of studios that wanted to develop films with us. And so we hired outside writers because we were sure we weren't good enough to be able to write, and watched when they wrote stuff that was, well, we had one gentleman who wrote for like 6 months on something that was supposed to be a thriller and gave us a 145-page screenplay. And after that 6 months, and we're going, oh my God. And reading it, it just didn't work. We go, wait a minute, we could be as bad as that. We frightened of, So we ended up managing to convince the head of MGM, who came to us after we patched up a movie called Victory, which John Huston had directed. We'd done the same post-production editing and streamlining using editors, but really trying to guide them to seeing the emotional flows and the physicalities and the things that most scripts have chunks of dialogue. The editors know how to put all that together, but when you just don't have anything but action for a while, that takes a different kind of thinking. So this was the guy called Freddie Fields, and he came to us and he said, I got this friend of mine who's trying to put a movie out called The Karate Kid, and I want to beat him out. And he was going to make it out over at Warner Brothers. And I want to beat him out with a movie called The Karate Kids. And I gave these writers the weekend to write it, and they really let me down. And you go, what?
Wow.
This is the intelligence of the studio head. He thinks he can write a feature in a weekend. So I said to my partner, John, well, they're going to pay us $15,000 to supervise writers. And I said, why don't we tell them we'll write it for the $15,000, which at that time was the fee for a feature script. And then if they don't like it, then we'll supervise writers. So we wrote our first screenplay, expecting not necessarily to write a brilliant piece, but at least knowing that we weren't any worse than what they were getting. And I think we couldn't be, what was written on a weekend couldn't be that, And those guys had done a pretty good job considering what they were given. And we got, ended up getting that movie made independent of MGM, financed by a private entrepreneur, and it got made. It was called The Zoo Gang. We would go long periods of time without success, and then we pick something up long periods of time without success, which is why I don't like being called a master, because in a way it implies some kind of perfection and there's some kind of unreachable, position in the industry. And I'm just a guy that keeps, falling forward from passion. I love what I do. I love my photography. I love being able to tell stories and discovering humanity through them. And when I had the privilege of having a son with my wife, and I'd come from a very difficult life. My mother died when I was 8. My father married a very tempestuous and difficult woman. Home life, I was stuck in orphanages a couple of times. When she was trying to get rid of us, it's like being a cuckoo came in and tried to throw us out. And so that sense of the value of having a child and realizing I was not going to be like my stepmother. And I was not going to be like my father, who had betrayed the family by letting that woman come into our house. And I watched how much effort it took to raise a child, how much love it took. And at that time, Stallone and Schwarzenegger were making films where, gunning people down was considered to be heroic, commando, and, dead body counts were really to be admired. And I thought, what if you try to make a movie that spoke to altruism, spoke to risk-taking for the benefit of others? And I coined the terms the takers of life, which was those movies where people are killed for celebration, which unfortunately Keanu Reeves does. And they're great movies. They're fun to watch. But on a philosophical sense, what are they saying to humanity? And I looked at ideas that were, and I collect ideas like flypaper. I just stick them on my noteboards, and and some things stick and some don't. Robin Hood came to me as Robin Hood Raiders style. And that idea sort of hooked somewhere. And then the idea of putting an Arab and a Christian side by side, where there's a delightful, it's almost like a really cool idea that, you put your enemy with your hero, and instead of fighting, they learn from each other. And that was apparently, one of the very few people that had ever tried to take a Muslim character and turn them into a hero at that point. And I've had Muslim people tell me, somebody quite recently, that it changed their lives to see them reflected as positive heroes. And as children, they were watching a movie where their religion and their belief systems were being supported in a positive light. So that was wonderful. And I had this vision of trying to tell a story about an aggressive, negative asshole, a guy who was a baron's son who was spoiled, and that his dad had begged him not to go off to war to try and force other men to their religion, and he did it anyway. And when he did, he learned the lesson that there were people around him that were brave, but they weren't necessarily the people he thought of. It might be the young nobleman that they thought was a cow, but he stands his ground, and the big Ponzi ones would run away. And so he comes back and finds that his father's dead, and he's angry, but he's angry at himself.
Yeah.
And my concept was that we take him from selfish, where he's trying to use the woodsman, the peasants, to fight to get revenge against the Sheriff of Nottingham, who's caused his father to die, to the point where he's willing to die for the future of his peasants' children. And that was my model for the piece. And I had a writing experience where I was writing a screenplay for TriStar after I'd done the movie The Kiss. And I was writing against my nature. I was asked to write a thing which was, there is a movie called Astronauts' Wives. I actually wrote a movie called Astronauts' Wives for TriStar before that other one. And it was not my nature, because it was a horror movie, and I was getting depressed. I was like plucking the words out of my flesh. It was hard. And I was getting depressed. And one of my partners suggested I work with a guy called Jay Roach as a writing assistant. And Jay is, ended up doing the Austin Powers movies and Meet the Parents and things. But back then, he was just a cool dude, and we both got along. And he was my ally, and helped me. He taught me how to use an iMac, for instance. That was a breakthrough. I could start using the computer myself instead of someone else having to do it for me. So that process of looking at what was I going to say was being filtered through the fact that Jay also turned me on to Joseph Campbell, which I had never discovered before, and explained to me the theory of the universal story and the hero's journey. And I didn't get it all, but I got enough of it to realize that my Robin Hood was sort of tracking along some of those lines. And I started thinking in terms of what do I love? Well, I loved King Solomon's Mines. And King Solomon's Mines has a witch in it called Gagul. And I thought, what if you put a witch into Robin Hood, like a character like that? Would be very cool. So I started, putting that little piece on the shelf. And then I thought, what else do I like? Well, I loved, and I'm really simple. I don't want to read if I don't have to. So I read a lot of classics illustrated magazines, the comic books. And I remember reading the Moby Dick version and thinking that Queequeg was a really cool character. And what if my Muslim character, my Arab character, was sort of like Queequeg, who had this dignity and this religion and this. So I was influenced by that. And Queequeg is tattooed. And in my original versions of the early scripts, that was also, my Muslim character was tattooed. And having sort of seen these elements that went in to make this story cohesive and borrowing from things that have magic to them for me, I also called the Arab character Aslan, which is lion. And that was the first thing I was told I couldn't do, was call him lion because of the errors and omissions insurance, because that's too close to Aslan in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So we ended up calling him Azim, but still trying to keep that simple thing. So I went and pitched the Robin Hood I wanted to write to 3 different studios. And I thought, well, this is pretty cool. I've got my story, my act sort of together. Not good at everything there, and I don't believe you have to have everything there to pitch. I believe that pitching is a conversation with your buyer, trying to find common ground. It's not going in with an elevator pitch and not opening, letting them open their mouths till you finish your 45, minute and a half or 3-minute pitch, but trying to engage them in the philosophy of what you're writing and what you're excited about, what it impassions you. And if you can find common cores, then they can also feel like they're contributing. So 3 studios Geffen, TriStar, and Disney all said, wow, that's the stupidest idea we've ever heard. No one wants to see guys with swords. They want to see people with guns. So I got 3 negatives. And there was a certain sense in my own office that, maybe putting an Arab in Robin Hood was going to be really awkward and difficult. So don't try that. And our assistant, a guy called Mark Stern, who ended up being the president of the Sci-Fi Channel for a while, he was typing our scripts and things. He said, I think that's a really great idea. If there's anything I could do to encourage you to write it, I would love to support you. And so because of him, I said it's like blowing on the embers, because somebody took a positive attitude on something I was passionate about. I sat down and started to write it. And I was giving my pages to him and to my partner, John Watson, and they were reading them. And what I discovered is you can't analyze what you're reading while you're writing. And your critic is sitting there going, oh, this is terrible. I call him the golem. This is a waste of time. This is stupid. Why are you doing this? This is never going to sell. All that shit's going on in your head. And at the same time, you're writing, how Robin gets to meet his Muslim character and rescue him, and that and it sort of feels, I don't know. But what happened was that I was getting feedback from these 2 people telling and encouraging me not to be self-critical, just to keep going. And I call the first draft the Lewis and Clark. It's an adventure. Any fucking way to the coast is legitimate. It doesn't matter how many wrong mountains you go up or how many things. If you get there, that's brilliant. Then you can put the freeway through, and that means then you chop off all the stuff you didn't need. But you can't write perfectly. It's impossible. That's why we have rewrites. That's why when we shoot an actor, we give them 4 or 5 takes. We don't say get it right or we'll shoot you. It's like, so we do that to ourselves when we're writing, because we've been taught by books that are in some cases really helpful as agendas, but not necessarily helpful to the creative process. And I'm very taken. I'm yapping away here, but I'm very taken when you talk about that we're shaman. And I think there's a like a rainbow of humanity, and there are the pragmatics and the down to earths and the people that we need to build our airplanes. Don't let me build your airplane. I'm going to say, what screw is this? Maybe if I stuck it here, this might work. No, you don't want me doing that. But dreaming an idea that never existed before and then trying to figure out how to put, I'm great at that. But you need encouragement, and you're risk taking, and you're going into the unknown. And the reason you're doing it is because I think we want to tell the community something that's magical about humanity, values, morality, which all sounds a bit corny, but I honestly believe that we are designed to tell stories biologically. And yes. there's a at York University, there's I think it's still up. They have a biology of story research development, and I'm one of the people talking on it. And that biology means that our stories are bred into us to tell them in order to stabilize our communities. And morality is one of the things that's bred for, which is phenomenal to me. And there's a book called The Moral Animal by Robert Wright. And it was so emotional for me to read it, because it says, in order for a society, which we're a tribal animal, we're a pack animal, to find the ability to get our genes into the future, which is what we're designed to do, we need to actually treat each other with morality, so that we share, so that we all get our young into the future. And then we have our outliers. We have the bad guys and the people who want to take it away, and we have those. But when I'm doing Robin Hood, what I'm really writing is a story about stability of the culture. That these people are looking to stabilize the world that they're in, so their young can get into the future. And started writing my Robin Hood, and coming in with Maid Marian. Okay, Maid Marian. How do I make Marian fresh again? Oh, I know. I'm going to write this thing where our Robin walks into this home and looks up on the balcony of this very, very large lady. And
Yes.
oh my, the years have been kind to you. And lying through And then he's suddenly jumped by a person in a mask and starts fighting them, and then realizes that's Maid Marian. And I thought, that's corny. Is it corny or is it good? I can't tell. So so I go back to my guys and get my feedback, and just kept writing on passion. I do some homework. I did take a lady to lunch who was an expert on Beowulf, because I had no idea what Beowulf was and why it had lasted all these years, and what could I take from Beowulf to enrich my world. And the things that she talked about was the witches and things, and so that sort of infused my writing. I would always, when I was writing a historical piece, I'd go through a book called The Timelines of History, which had every year in history with all the major elements that were developed, the big historical elements, the books that were written, or the events, the plagues, what have you. And I would look usually on about 150 or 100 years above and below the period I was writing, and make notes of the cool stuff. So I wanted to show how cultured the Arab nation was, and how these scruffy ass English people with their patchy kind of like clothing and things were going up against guys that knew astronomy and knew medicine and probably had telescopes, which is not inconceivable. And so I'm trying to bring all these things together in a very stream of consciousness way, not writing to some formula, but writing to see what comes out of me when I have these tools. So I'm writing from something, which is these ideas that John and I used to find terminology for things. We call them islands of sanity. There'd be things that we had gaps in, and then things we thought were really cool. And as I'm writing, I know I have my islands of sanity. I want to get to this, I want to get to that. And then you just invent as you go. So the first draft of Robin Hood was entirely written by me, and I don't write. I love Final Draft. I'm brought out each year, mentor the winners of the Final Draft contest, and to try and encourage them to take advantage of the opportunity and don't have the imposter syndrome that I had when it's like. But I frequently don't write my very first draft in Final Draft. I'll write it in a straightforward Word program, so that I can bump things up and down, and I'm not getting lost in trying to put dialogues in. And I'll write my dialogue and just put a name, and because I want the most fluid and flexible writing process. Suddenly, if an idea pops in, run down through this document and throw it in here. Don't get lost in formatting. It's idea generation, it's flexibility, it's flow. And so when I finished, I had this, what I call a script thing, which is like 110 pages, and all the characters, the lines, everything's there, but it's not actually formatted. John is available, and I'm going off to write another horror movie because our company was broke again, and we needed the money to stay in business. And so I gave him the Robin Hood, said, would you format this and do whatever you want to it? Because he's actually amazing, being English. He actually, we co-wrote The Last Dragon 2, and he wrote dialogue for Black characters in this Last Dragon thing. That was really cool. So I don't know where he got it from, but it was amazing to see him do it. And so he went at his own, tweaking and doing things, and he went through it. And we got to, and I'm, again, this is like, we've been passed on by, so it's not like the biggest thing in his world to do this, but because it's been passed on, but it's something I want to do and accomplish. And then we heard that Fox had a Robin Hood. It was greenlit with John McTiernan, the director of Die Hard, and it was Christmas time, and John was busy finishing this thing. He goes, wait a minute, I'm not going to work through Christmas doing this. And I beat him up. I said, you got to do this. You got to do this. Because I had given up on another script of mine. And am I rambling, or is this helpful?
No, this is gold to me. Yeah.
Well, I had this is what I call a life script. These are not trying to hit conventional goals. They're not trying to be formed to meet some kind of pre-digested norm. They're the scripts. I don't know what they are, but they're coming out of me with passion, with a certainty I will discover things. And so I'm writing with that passion. And I had another project a few years earlier, which had come to me in that unformed, that I knew it was going to be something form, and it was very special, but I couldn't fully get it out. And it was going to be a movie about a detective with a tragedy in his past, investigating the murder of a Navajo artist. And as I was starting to write it, with Jay Roach was helping me, my partner said, "Don't bother. Thunderheart's getting made. They've got Robert De Niro. It's a waste of time. Put it aside. Go find something else." And Thunderheart didn't get made for 4 years, and it wasn't with Robert De Niro. And there's a feeling that you get, which I call being ripe. When a story wants to come out of you, it wants to blossom out of you, and then it goes away. And I was no longer right, but I was mad at myself for giving up and letting this go, for teaching myself to fail. And now we were going to do that again. We were going to stop Robin Hood before it was finished. And so I just begged John to finish it, because I just didn't want to keep learning how to stop getting to the end of something that I cared about. And he finished the script, and then I went back through it and added a couple of other things. That the idea that the sheriff was the witch's son was one of the things I added in that pass, and which it got shot, but didn't get into the first form of the movie. But the other thing that happened to me when I was writing, and I'm writing from this, what I call the life script process, that I'm 2/3 of the way into the screenplay, and I suddenly feel myself writing that the Arab Muslim is going to help Little John's wife give birth, and it's going to be a cesarean, and he's going to have that line, "I've done it on horses before." And I realized that I'm writing the emergency cesarean that my wife and I experienced, where she had been in labor for 22 hours. They decided that they were having fetal distress, and they were going in, and they couldn't find the anesthetist. And the pediatrician or her, I can't remember the name of it, but anyway, one of the doctors for Wendy said, "If they don't turn up, we're going in without it." And you're going, "Oh, whoa." So, and there were people dropping things, and there was, and the fetal distress thing was freaking everybody out. And then our son was born, and the guy did turn up. I was the first person he wanted to throw out of the operating room, because I had my gown done up this way instead of from the back. I wasn't supposed to be there. And Wendy's doctor said, "Stop arguing with him and get on with it." So I cried when I wrote that scene. And I thought, you can't put a birth scene in an action movie. And I go, yes, you can. Because what I'd really done was I'd written what they were fighting for, which was the future of their children. And that was the first scene the director didn't want to shoot. And I phoned up Kevin Costner, who I'd known very slightly when we had the same agency, and I'd been to a dinner at my agent's place, and Kevin was there with his wife, and I phoned him up and said, "Could you please get this shot?" So he at least pushed and got it shot, but it wasn't in the first cut of the movie. We ended up going backwards to when John finished the screenplay. We gave it to our third partner, who was American, and he read it and he liked it. We go, "Americans like a Robin Hood? Well, this is kind of weird," because John was English, I'm English. And then we gave it to other people to read. And we always learned that it's what we call asshole proofing. You always give your scripts to people who will give you information about your potential mistakes, the clarity, things that you don't want your buyer to experience. If you give an early script to a buyer, they don't have the imagination to know how to fix it. And they'll tell you they do. This is their business. They read scripts all the time, but they don't. We're the ones with the imaginations. They're the ones that get to decide whether or not it's appropriate or whether they can help package it. But they're not going to be able to jump the problems. And when they see the problem, they just fall in the crevice. So I used to say that I give all my early drafts to what I call story midwives, people that are going to help push through the pain of giving birth And that agenda is to help you give birth to the child you're having, not tell you it has to be a woman or it has to be a man that you give birth to, but that whatever it is the beauty of it. So finished the script, gave it to some people that read it, kept getting this feedback that was really excited people. And we ended up that we put it out on the market on a spec, and we did our best and I did my best, again out of passion, to figure out how to manipulate the buying of it. So I had a relationship with somebody who'd gone to work with Steven Spielberg. And again, because we had deals at the studios and we were curious, we would do things like meet with the people who did the audience analysis. And we'd ask them what works, because that seemed like the most important thing. And at Universal, when we were working on a film called Paradise Alley with Sylvester Stallone, which was his first directing film, we took the audience analysis people to lunch and said what works. And they said, new, interesting, and different, but our people don't know how to sell it. And I actually phoned up that one of those two people who had then gone to work at Warner Brothers and said, why did the Batman movie succeed? And he said, well, because Robin Hood had that same thing. It was like men in tights was what was sort of in people's minds, and Batman was guys in tights going pow, boink,
Right.
And he said, well, because we called it The Dark Knight, we divorced you from the previous one. So I made sure that our Robin Hood was seen in those terms of being a dark Robin Hood, a unique Robin Hood, starting off in a jail cell, which might be now or might be 500 years, 600, 800 years ago. But making sure that we were not going to follow the normal, here, this is a green wood and this guy swinging on a rope and he's jumping on the guy with a horse to get his purse. And that was what we realized, was that we were selling a movie that people could understand because they'd seen Robin Hood succeed. And I say always describe your films in terms of successes that your buyer wants, because that's what you're really doing, is you're selling their futures, their goals, their careers, not yours. And if you can help them see what you've created in terms of goals that they can understand, so instead of having them to invent why your movie works or having to come up with how to sell it, if you can actually come in and say, well, this is the Dark Knight version of Robin Hood, and they go, oh, well, that made a lot of money. Oh, maybe this is okay. And so you're really doing both things. I say writing a screenplay and selling a screenplay can be as hard as one or the other, because you have to push yourself to do it. And because we also had this curiosity, I would go meet with the people that ran the story departments at the studios. And I would go meet with the people that ran the story departments at the agencies and ask them what's going on, what do they know, what are they learning, what's the flow of product, what's coming through. And these people, no one ever talks to them. They're delighted to talk to people because they're sitting in the back just churning out pages and pages of stuff with no one really paying big attention to them. And so the lady that I had met was, I think, something to do with the story department at TriStar, and she moved over with to Spielberg. And I made sure that I communicated with her. And then she and I chatted, and she looked at the script, and she said, I'm going to give this to Steven Spielberg to read because I think it's really cool. And I said, phone my agent and tell him, but don't tell him that I told you. So I got a call about 10 minutes later, and he said, hey, Spielberg's going to read your script, and I realized that we're making everybody excited, and we're trying to stay in control, and we're not but we're doing it through networking. So we end up where the script that we couldn't sell, the script that no one wanted, suddenly was being grabbed by either Warner Brothers, Fox, or a company called Morgan Creek. And what behind the scenes, we were told that if Warner Brothers, who was offering us the largest amount of money, was going to give it to Joel Silver and get rid of us. And that was the scuttlebutt that was coming out of Warner Brothers to the people that I knew that had relationships with me. We really were fairly certain that the guy that was running Fox, Joe Roth, was going to buy the script and kill it so that he could make his Robin Hood. And the one channel that was open was Morgan Creek, who seemed to genuinely want to make the movie. And I think that Jim Robinson, who was like the last mogul, he was the guy that put his own money up for the movies. And I think he wanted to show Joe Roth, who had worked for him and got a lot of credit for the movies that have made, which enabled him to go become the president of 20th. But he wanted to show that he could do it too. And so we ended up deciding to go with that sale, which was less than the others. But what we were was attached to our film as producer irrevocably. And so we had sort of custodial power to try and put the movie together. And my partner, John, moved into Morgan Creek's offices again so that we could have influence on the process. And suddenly there was 3 Robin Hoods other than ours out there. So no one wanting one, we got to, so they're everywhere. They're like flies. You want to swat them. And John was able to convince Jim Robinson to let him move to England and start packaging, hiring, getting studios, getting production designers, costumers, and things in a race. And we all realized there was one person who could play Robin Hood that would financially and emotionally be the right person, and that was Costner. And Costner apparently had been taken into 20th Century Fox and shown posters of himself dressed as Robin Hood, and he was not impressed. And what had happened was he had an agent called J.J. Harris, who passed away quite some time ago, who he had left to go to CAA. And J.J. sent him our script saying, you should do this. And she knew him really well. She'd helped to put his career together. And she was, even though she would get no commission, she really believed he should do it. He read it and fell in love with it. So then we had to find a director, and then, then another whole bunch of adventures. But that's the Robin Hood story.
Right. Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, because Kevin Reynolds had directed him in Fandango. Right. He had been cut out of The Big Chill, and Silverado was yet to come, right, to make it up to him. Lawrence Kasdan, I believe. And so that is amazing. That's a great journey.
Just finished shooting Dances with Wolves.
Yeah.
And people were calling it Kevin's Gate because they were sure it was going to fail.
Yeah. They love to root against him. People just love to root against him.
This business loves to blow you up and then pop you. Maybe it's a human trait. I don't know. To keep people from getting too much power. Who knows?
Yeah, there's just a couple of things I want to say, and then we'll move on to Mal Flanders. I chose these 3 because I feel like you bring a new take to all of them, and I love genre, and I love genre writing. I always try to come up with something new when I go into a genre. That makes me feel like less of an imposter. At least I know why I'm here. So next week I'm doing a solo show about writing fantasy, because I've written a couple of fantasy novels, and heavy genre where J.R.R. Tolkien is like the shadow that passes over all of us. So my first novel was Jester Knight, where I took the jester and I took the knight and said, what if this is one person? It's basically left, right side of the brain. But this is your show, not my show. So
that's a great thing, because that's called bisociation. And when you take 2 things that are from different worlds and force them together, you get a new world. And that is a really great creative technique. I'm doing Raiders and Robin Hood. It's a very functional way of trying to get free and to be creative.
Yeah, I love it. And it speaks to my dual personality. What I love, and you were talking about as you were pitching to the audience here, this is the Robin Hood, this is how I want him, he's the spoiled baron, his motivations change. So you did a beautiful job using Christian Slater's character to reflect on the familial. And Marion said, you were the boy who pulled my hair. Well, can you allow for the fact that I'm not that man anymore? Well, that's tell. So show me. Like, it was so beautifully done, because as you know, because thank you for watching my shows and looking at the book and all, I love this idea of the character continuum, where all the characters to the left and right of the central character are reflections. That's how we see behavior. And I just wanted to point out that I think Robin, I almost used the word masterful, so I won't use the word masterful. Robin Hood is a wonderful demonstration of how the main character is reflected challenged, motivated, and we gauge their growth by the responses of the characters around them. And I just wanted to point that out to you.
And it's cool. And also, I would say that John contributed, Kevin Reynolds contributed. The script grew. I was doing rewrites as we were writing and giving pages to Costa to make sure he was comfortable and making sure that Reynolds was comfortable. So that these other ideas were brought in, and some of the lines that we're famously given the credit for were actually written by a comedy punch-up person who was brought in. So Rickman, who just desperately didn't want to do another villain. He's feeling really trapped in villainhood. And so he was given by Reynolds a lot of freedom to explore and to see what he could bring to it that made that unique performance. And so, I don't want to take claim for everything that goes out there. I'm really proud of the movie. I'm really proud of the things that I envisioned, and it's definitely my vision, but it was added to by all of these wonderful team of people. So.
Right, that's neat. And it's trending now on Netflix.
Well, yeah, that's weird. 35 years later, this darn thing is apparently on all around the world. It's doing major showings, and you go, oh wow, and you keep hoping that your movies will live and that they part of, as opposed to TV, which is disposable. I always saw movies kind of like tombstones. They're on your horizon and they still stay there. And so that this thing is still out there and people laugh and enjoy it and then finds kind of like emotional solace about being a decent human being and doing the right thing and being able to come through your own, because Robin Hood's character says, my pride brought us to this, and learns from Will, the bastard son who has been excluded from the family, to become a better human. So those things are cool, and they're like the things you look at other people and you think, oh, they're smart, they thought this up. I was doing some of that. Okay, not bad.
I love, and of course you have in the last frames of the film, you have Sean Connery do that wonderful cameo that just makes it perfect.
That's another one of those things where being passionate and being so emotional about that this movie, I wanted to make a statement with the film, hiding the medicine. As I said to Costa when he was talking to the characters playing the woodsman, I said, capture, don't lecture. You never want them to feel like they're being pushed. You want them to feel they're being seduced by this great oratory of yours. And what I heard while I was doing the rewrites and things was that they were thinking about trying to get John Cleese to play that role. And I go, oh my God, no, because everything that I've written in this movie is a sincere point of view. It's got a sincere statement about humanity. It's got values in it. And if John Cleese comes up at the end, then you basically say this was all a joke.
Right,
and
of course.
So I went to, of my own volition, went to CAA and tried to talk to Mike. My brain is not as good as it used to be. My prefrontal cortex is jamming up with age.
Oh, Michael Ovitz?
Michael Ovitz, right.
Yeah.
And I ended up talking to the assistant, said, could you get Sean Connery to be in this movie? It's one day's work. But we can't pay him any money because we're already way over budget. We can't give him any credit because people will be waiting the whole movie for him to turn up. But I can guarantee you it'll be a piece of film history. And so Mike's assistant said, send me the pages. And he phones me back up and says, and I tweak them a little bit, try and make it a little bit better. And he phones back and says, well, Mike says he'll do it, but it'll be $1 million. And I go, no, you don't understand. There isn't $1 million. Can't be done. What we need is that he will appear for a fee because he's already worked with Kevin on The Untouchables. Hopefully they've got some kind of relationship, and this would be just a wonderful thing. So they ended up that they made a $250,000 donation to a Scottish hospital.
And I remember that.
We ended up in the movie, and that was how we got paid.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful.
And that, again, is the demonstration of passion, because I'm shy. I don't like pushing things. I don't want to stick my neck out, as I said, but my errors of omission are the ones that killed me. And so I wouldn't let that be an error of omission. I would not. And I love John Cleese. I think he's fantastic, but not for that. So, that's what you do when you're working from something that is a life script that's impassioning. And it just, and I say that altruism and ego are things that you can fire up when you have goals that are not selfish.
Right. Exactly right. I love that you say that about the errors of omission, because one of the quotes that's been a guiding light since I was in high school, Michael Caine was being interviewed, and they said, "Well, what are your big regrets in life?" And he said, "I would never want to regret the things I didn't do. That would truly be a tragedy." He's like, "And the things I do, you get over it, you keep going," which is well, Bill Paxton said, "Come on, please. There's no defeat. You just keep going." And so I love that. I love to hear that from you. So let's move on to Mall Flanders, because time is just zipping by here. And let's do something a little different with Mall. Let's do why this piece, what drew it to you, and when you read about this piece online and in cinema history and all, some people love that you conceived of her in a different way, and some people didn't love it so much. So if you can frame it in that way and talk about Mall, that would be wonderful.
I had a review that said I should be horsewhipped for making that film. So
yeah, some of them were really unkind, and I love it. It's a beautiful film.
And in my book on screenplay writing, I have a chapter called "Was It Worth It?" And that chapter is about that you're going to get people that don't buy what you did, but you can't please everybody. What you have to do is please the thing that muse in you, and do things for purposes that are meaningful to you. And Mall Flanders is the most magical and emotionally valuable thing I've ever done in my life. And God bless them if they want to say I should be horsewhipped. Good job. Go for it.
Press some buttons.
I welcome you to enjoy those feelings, because I got to do what I wanted to do. While I was writing Robin Hood, incidentally, while I was writing Robin Hood, I did write a sequel. The whole sequel popped into my head, and I wrote down all the things that sequel is going to be, and we never got it made. And I don't know why it never got made. But it was a really cool sequel, because I had Robin Hood and his team be recruited to go and try and rescue Richard, who's being held hostage in the Holy Land. And he was sent with gold by King John, and the gold turned out to be lead. And they were being sent off as thieves so that John could blame them, so he didn't have to have his brother come back. And they get to the Holy Land, and they're broke, and they've got no and they heard that there's these robbers who have a large treasure chest, and they can maybe get that. So they go in, and they're trapped, and they're basically screwed. They're going to be all executed. And the chief robber turns out to be Azim, and he is actually the leader of that country who's been dethroned. And so Robin Hood and him team up, and they rescue Richard, and they all go. So that was the thing that came in my head as I was writing. And I say, you got to write these down. They don't stay with you. So I wrote, for one day, I just wrote that. So Mall Flanders, I knew I was going to write a woman's story. I knew I had this literal gut instinct that there was going to be something, a historical female figure. She was going to be very important to me, but I didn't know why. And I looked at Molly Malone, I looked at Nell Gwynn, and I couldn't find the things that fired me up. And I was driving along one day, listening to NPR radio about an orphans and foundlings home that had been turned into a museum. They had letters from women who had abandoned their baby on the doorstep hundreds of years before. And I thought, what does a woman write to a child she may never see again? What is that would be meaningful? And I found myself getting like the last lines of a movie. And it was, what say you, child, now that you've heard your mother's story? And obviously she's been read the letter. And it's a little 5-year-old, 6-year-old in rags out of an orphanage who's been confronted by a very wealthy looking woman. And the little girl says, you could throw me out without a crust to eat before I deny that woman is worthy of my love. And she says, prepare yourself, child, for I am that woman, I am your mother. And I knew what I wanted was to tell a story where a woman who had failed her daughter and wanted her to know all of her flaws, all of her failings, all of the things in her life story before she would let her move in, because she didn't want to trick her into being with her. And I didn't tell my partners. I wasn't going to do that thing again. And I only shared it with my writing assistant, a lady who had gotten a thesis in Shiros at Brown University. And she teared up, I teared up, And I knew I was going to write this, not knowing what the rest of it was. But I was ripe, and you could feel this is again another life script. And I knew it was something to do with having a daughter. And I started working on it and deciding that I would have this character Hibble, who was a butler for a madam in a whorehouse, and that he was going to read this document to this child that he'd gone to England to get out of the orphanage and bring her, and that the child be feisty and different, and and just kept pouring out of me, and I'm doing all my normal work because I'm not telling my partners that I'm writing this thing. So I'm in bed with my typing with my wife looking over at me. She's very tolerant. Without her, I wouldn't be where I am. And a few days in, Terry Clark, my assistant, brings in Moll Flanders' book, and it says on the front, right at the front, "The Memoirs of a Thief and a Whore Who Ended Up Living Well in Virginia." And I go, oh, so I don't believe in hard work. I believe in finding solutions. So I got the Cliff Notes, and I read them through quickly, and there was things I could use, but I also didn't want a lot of the things. And I wanted to borrow the character of Moll Flanders to tell a story about a woman whose circumstances have put her into situations that she strived to do the best she could, that she was born from a woman in England. They would not hang you if you were pregnant. So women would get pregnant from the guards and get 9 more months of life, then give birth and be hung. Right. And I thought that would be a phenomenal thing to have somebody come from. And then she ends up going to a whorehouse because that's the only place she can find, and thinks it will give her freedom and financing, and ends up that she becomes depressed and close to being alcoholic. And a itinerant artist comes in and hires her to paint her nude, and he also does this. He draws human anatomy parts from corpses. So she's walking around this place thinking she's going to get murdered because she's seeing human legs and things. And he confesses that he brought her to his place because she was the cheapest. And I always thought that was kind of cool. But they fall in love and have a daughter. Yeah. And so I borrowed other elements from the folk story, a family that had brought her in, and she was able to learn a little bit about family life and things from them, and then discovering, that she ends up living well in Virginia. So those are the elements. But also I wrote in, I'm going to say this, this character which Stockard Channing played, which was the madam who was my stepmother. And all the things I didn't like about my stepmother, I put into this character: selfishness and drug taking and, vindictive. And Moll and she are on a boat, and the boat is going down. And my stepmother character, Moll Flanders, is madam who's forced her on this boat against her will and separating her from her child, forces her to take all of her money and wear it on her body. Yeah. And she the two of them are thrown overside, and when they're close to drowning, the madam is trying to clutch at her, and Moll Flanders goes this: "Not this body, not this time, never again," and will not help her. And even though she's being pulled down by the money herself, and I realized that's what I would have done to my stepmother. I would never kill her, but boy, if she was in trouble, I'm not going to go help her. Right. Right. And when I was writing, it was the most magical writing process, because it was like watching puzzle pieces come out of my life. My friend Fred Mullin told a joke: when the dick goes hard, the brain goes soft. And I have the madam say, man's nothing but a bull. When his thingy goes hard, and I'm just, it's great, put it in, don't question. I don't know how I'm writing dialogue for these women. I'm not going to question, and the passion and emotion that I felt in this flow was extraordinary. And I've written in flow, but I've never written like that. And I got to, again, a birth scene. And Moll has married this artist, and he dies of smallpox. And he has left her with almost nothing. and people come to collect his body to take it off to be cut up and to be put in, and she won't let them take it. And then she starts to give birth. And what she does is she arranges all the paintings that he's painted, so the first thing her child sees is her father's art. And I thought, that's really so cool. And every time I see the birth scene, I cry. I got to the end of the script, got in 5 weeks, handed all my normal work. And I did my normal tweaking and proofing with my writing assistant, Terry Clark. And then we shared it. And I got the head of UA, because we had a deal with UA MGM to look at it. And he said, yeah, I don't get it. And I was so passionate. I went and begged him to look at it again and try to explain to him. And he said, no, I still don't get it. But when he watched the movie with me, oh, now I get it. And I realized that you can have things in your head that people just can't understand. It's your job to try and help informationally get people on board. So I'm going, oh, this will probably never happen, because UA was the arty division, and they would be, if anybody's going to do a historical movie. John goes, well, let's send it to the guys at MGM. And so he sends it off, and Mike Marcus phones me, who's the president of MGM, and says, I love this. I want this in the theaters next Christmas for our Christmas movie. I'm going, holy crow.
Wow.
2 days later, I get a call back, and it says, oh, no, we've looked at our schedule, and I'm sorry we don't have any room for it. So I go, oh, excuse me. And I can't give up. Again, I've got scripts I gave up on. I've written scripts that I should have fought for. I wrote Gulliver's Travels for Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh, whoa.
For Disney. And the head of Disney says, it's a really good script. I don't know why I'm not going to make it. And instead of engaging and trying to figure out how to turn him around, you go, oh, okay. So there's a guy called Frank Mancuso, who's the chairman of the board of MGM. He's a very courtly man, very experienced, but he had actually been head of distribution for films in Canada when we were making short films there, and had paid to blow up one of our theatrical shorts to go into the movie theaters. And I thought, okay, I don't know what I want. I want a distribution deal, a neg pickup. I want half a neg, whatever it is. I'm going to see if I could actually get him to read it. So I called for a meeting, which is like asking if I can go to the Vatican and meet the Pope for me.
Yeah.
And I go in, and he goes, you know, when Moll started drinking, I thought she was such a bitch, no one would ever want to see the movie. And I'm going, oh, well, now I know why they passed on it. But I had, in Canada, the Kodak rep kept coming around every couple of months and embarrassing us, asking us to buy more film stock. And we could never afford it unless we were actually making a movie. John once got up to an awards ceremony and put his whole finger through the hole in his shoe, because we would freeze footage until we could afford to pay for the processing, or we would get people to lend us their cameras and pay them when we made the movies. But that's how we made movies. And I said to the Kodak rep, if you could teach us how to sell more movies, we'd buy more film stock. So they actually put on a seminar with a guy from Chicago to teach filmmakers how to sell. And there basically was three things: define a need, eliminate the objections, and close. And so I go, oh my God, the Kodak course. And I go, yeah, I understand how you can see that. It was absolutely right that you could see it that way, because you cannot argue with people, you'll close them down. You have to value their opinions, and you have to give them substantive responses that say, I understand. So you repeat back to them what they've said to you. And I said, I wanted you to see her at the bottom, her belly of the beast, but not to dislike her. And I've obviously failed to do that. What else didn't work for you? And he read it. And I kept saying, what else didn't work for you? Trying to squirrel away all these things. And I thought, he's going to catch me. This is like so obvious that I'm trying to drain him of all these negatives, because the course said most people only ask for 2 or 3 objections, and they fail to get to most people have 5 to 7. And if you don't dig them all out, you're not going to be able to complete the journey of bringing them around and finding mutual goals that succeed for them to feel comfortable. So I went away and rewrote it in 3 days and gave it back to him. Now, my partners are nuts. They're going, wow, you're going to get us thrown out of here for bothering him. You know, it's like, But I went in and I made sure, and there's things like when you introduce a character, don't introduce a character who's got problems without writing in, you're going to meet this person, you're going to think they're irascible and difficult, but believe me, when you get to the end of the script, you're going to be crying and cheering for them. Because if you don't, that's not asshole proofing. You're letting the audience make the reader make a decision that might not be the one you want. And I call that fusion writing. Right, and I also believe don't put all mores and continues and scene numbers and things. The first draft of a script that you're selling should be a poetic journey through the pages. The layout should be kind to the eye. Don't have things hang up. But you can't do that in the very first draft. You do it as you evaluate the things that you've learned that work and don't. So clarifications, slight changes, give it back to him. And I'm in an office and MGM, and he walked by the office and looked in, saw me in the meeting, and he goes, my office after this. And that was how my principal used to cane me.
Yeah.
He was like, So I go in and I'm sort of shaky, and he goes, that's one of the best scripts I've ever read in my life. I'll give you $10 million, get me 2 stars, like Remains of the Day, and I'll make it. And then we went on a journey after that where it ended up that a few things happened that took about a year to pull it off. And we ended up, Robin Wright is the reason that movie got made. And I got a number of women that were really willing to play that role, but the studio didn't want them. And Robin had turned down 14 projects after Forrest Gump. And I had only done a movie called The Kiss, which was a supernatural thriller. You could say horror movie. And I wasn't sure that, but obviously the script itself, which was extremely poetic, extremely emotional, and very pro-women, had touched her. And we met, and I thought, this is my movie, because there's no one else the studio wants. And if I screw this up, I'm not going to get my movie made. And luckily, she had as bad a memory as I did for people's names. And the two of us chuckled over our vulnerabilities. And then we talked about the things she wanted. And one of the things she wanted, I looked at how do I get 2 stars? And I looked, who doesn't scare me? That was my way of looking at it.
Wow.
And I thought, I looped Morgan Freeman on our Robin Hood, because we'd taken over the movie, and I'd run the mix. And I thought, he's a really nice guy, and he's a star, and I'd love him to play Hibble, the butler. And so my partner, John, had a better relationship than I did, because he'd been more close to him on Robin Hood. And we sent the script off him, and he phoned me up and said, Pen, I think your words are poetry. You can tell people you have Morgan Freeman. So I had 1 star.
Nice.
I ended up with another actor who was willing to play another lead role in the movie, and I had 2 stars. And the studio had said, 2 stars were enough, but Frank Mancuso said, no, I want the Mo Flanders to be one. And then I ended up losing the 2nd star because Robin just didn't feel right working with that person, didn't feel the connection. So I took responsibility and backed off. And then I was called to a meeting with Frank Mancuso, and his head of business affairs was there, who was a guy in his late 70s, a wonderful man. His name was Frank too. And Frank Mancuso says, well, I'm sorry, we're not making the movie. I said, excuse me. He said, no, we asked for 3 stars and you've only got 2. And I go, oh man, after all this effort, we've got all the money together, we've gone through all kinds of things, and we just needed them. And his head of business affairs turned to him and said, and he was shaking, he said, Frank, you said 2. And Frank Mancuso looks up and he says, oh, well, then we'll make the movie.
Wow. Wow.
And there is honor in the business.
Yeah. Wow. So a good friend of mine that I went to college with and did theater, and he's going to be on the show in some weeks showing his art of celebrities that he draws celebrity women, asked, how did you get Stockard freaking Channing?
It was a giant gift. She is such a wonderful actress. I think we just literally gave her the script and she saw herself in it. And I had looked at a couple of other English actresses that didn't have her horsepower. I mean, her presence on screen is amazing.
Yes.
So we ended up, and she's a complex lady. You really, a lot of great actors are not simple people. They bring a complexity of life skills and emotions to you. When I met Brenda Fricker for the first time, who'd won an Oscar for My Left Foot, I asked to play one of the roles. She made the crudest joke I've ever heard, and I don't think I can actually repeat it here. And
Okay.
it was just to test me. Um,
Yeah.
and um, and I go, oh, well, that's not the lady I thought I was going to meet. And she was just down and dirty, but funny. And she said, if I'm wearing a corset, you're wearing a corset. Every moment I'm in a corset, you're in a corset. I wasn't sure she really meant it. Um, one of the things, again, this passion does, it makes you fight to get the best people you can get. And getting John Lynch and getting Stockard and getting people who were special. I got Jim Sheridan, who directed My Left Foot, because in the script, Moll is in an institution, in an orphanage kind of place with nuns, and she's being abused by a priest. And I'm like day two, I'm going to have some Irish guy grabbing it to my actress, and I'm thinking, oh my God, this could not work well. So I found that Jim Sheridan had actually done some acting, and it was actually in a movie that was set in the 1700s. So I thought, well, I'll see if he would actually play that role, and he did. So he knew him, and they were friends. So I had somebody who was, very comfortable for her to work with, and that made that really simple. Now, the other thing that was going on was we had a budget issue. We had set the movie in Ireland because there was certain tax breaks, and they'd had a Tom Cruise movie and Braveheart made there, and the crew thought these movies were endless sources of money. We actually didn't. We were on a tiny little budget, and our movie was over budget almost immediately because a lot of the things that they took for granted when there was a studio movie, there was always more cash, weren't there. Right. So we ended up fighting tooth and nail to bring the movie in at the budget we had, and it ended up that I had to shoot some sequences with one single take, just move the camera around because I didn't have time to do coverages. Yeah. And so in that particular instance, I've got Robin Wright. She's being whipped by nuns for lying because she wasn't, about this priest abusing her, and the priest is screaming out of it, spittle coming out of his mouth, and the scene is like 1.5 minutes long, and it doesn't work. And I know from directing my earlier movies that if you don't see it, if you don't feel it, it's not there. And I had no place to cut to. So I asked her to do it again, and she's exhausted. And she said, do I have to? I said, it's not there. She said, great. We did it 14 times. Now, wow. I am in pain. I feel like I'm the most merciless fucking guy. I feel like I'm taking a horse out of a racetrack, putting it in the starting gate, sending it out again and again and again. I'm starting to question my own sanity, but it's not there. On the 14th take, it was there. And it's something immeasurable. It sets off your sensoriness. You find yourself reflecting the emotions with people because your own face is moving, which we can talk about later if we have time. And so I was pushing myself to extremes to get this movie shot. And I also talked to John, who's producing it for me. And I said to him, there was one particular shot about 4 days in I could shoot. And I shot anamorphic, by the way, because I wanted the studio, when they went in to watch the dailies, I wanted the screen to open up.
Yeah, right. It's beautiful.
So it was my goal was to get a movie that impressed them and not and I actually, the head of Frank Mancuso came over to Ireland day 3 of the shoot, and I thought he was going to fire me. And he comes over and he goes, Pen, I got lots of movies with problems. This isn't one of them. You won't be seeing me again. You go,
nice. Oh. Wow.
So we ended up bringing that film out and getting it made. And one of the things I was so proud of was I got Jeremy Brett to play a character for one day. And Jeremy Brett, the original modern version of Sherlock Holmes, was just exquisite before the latest versions. And just amazing that he would contribute. And that's that passion again. I just wanted the best people. I got people who are film directors to play servants, because I knew, and Irish film directors of great repute, to just play small roles, because there are no small roles when you put somebody up against your actress. If they fumble, that doesn't work. And so I tried to find the best people all the way through. And I also tried to find people who were of a caliber that showed me what I hadn't yet achieved. Sometimes you people bring things to your actors that characters that you never dreamed could be there. One lady came in to read for the Mother Superior, and I said, "You're too young. I'm sorry. I just don't see you." The next day, another person came in, and she was haggard, and she was, and I thought, "That's weird. This is a strange." And she starts reading, and then I say, "You're great." She says, "Yes, I was here yesterday, but I've taken my makeup off."
That's awesome. Oh,
So
that's a great story.
yeah.
Listening, actors? Are you listening, actors? That's wonderful. I'm so glad you brought up Jeremy Brett, because I'm a huge Sherlock Holmes fan. I've written a Sherlock Holmes novel,
Wow.
and
Wow.
he was the Sherlock Holmes in my ear. And yeah, I've adapted Hound of the Baskervilles for young actors. And that
Wow.
was when I got the movie and I was looking on the back, and I said to my wife, Jeremy Brett is in it. And as much as I was loving the movie in every minute, and as a director, and I've written a book just about directing, and if I could do anything, I guess it would be a director full time, because I just think it's the sum total of everything, right?
You want all the
Directing.
problems.
And Stockard Channing was amazing, and Morgan Freeman's always Morgan Freeman, but clearly loved that part. And Robin Wright was wonderful, was amazing. But I was going through, when's Jeremy Brett coming? When's Jeremy Brett coming? And then he was there, and I was like, wow, Penn got to work with Jeremy Brett. I mean, just a brilliant guy. So that's wonderful. Can we, because we're about an hour and 16 in, can we
Okay.
talk a little about Houdini? The first question I want to ask you about Houdini is making a TV movie a lot different than making a cinematic movie?
Not for me, it wasn't, because TNT was boasting that they were making feature films for television.
Great.
So Houdini. Let's try and do this very quickly. I love magicians. Magicians are full of the people who deceive and lie and cheat for the best possible reasons. And years back, yes, we read that there was a magic manufacturing company in a place called Colon, just like asshole, Colon, Michigan. And we decided there were 6,000 magicians would go there for a magic festival in the middle of no place, and we decided we would take footage there. We didn't have anybody to make a movie with. We just went out to shoot it, and we started a documentary on magic in America. And it ended up, as we got pieces of money, I ended up also being involved with the Houdini Hall of Fame, and ended up helping to establish one of the seances that was like the 50th anniversary seance, which was being held there. And we also found footage of Bess Houdini, where she comes back from the 10th anniversary seance, and there's like this shrine to her husband with little candles, and he hasn't turned up, and she's sad, and she says, "Oh, Harry, I love you, never again," and blows out the candles. There was also a recording of the 10th anniversary seance, which took place apparently on the rooftop of the Knickerbocker Hotel, which is in Hollywood. And the recording was so corny. It was, "Oh, Harry, your little silver-haired wife is here. Do come to us." And I percolated, and I percolated for a long period of time, because the Houdini stuff was, he's a rock star.
Yeah.
He still beats magicians today. People can't be better than Houdini. And also complicated, egomaniacal, and yet the most amazing love affair. Met this girl who was 16 and he was 17 and proposed to her within a day. And I came up with this concept for a Broadway musical.
Oh.
And it blew me away. And it was that I was going to have the 10th anniversary seance be my bookends. It was going to be Bess's movie. She was going to arrive at the seance yearning to be one more time in touch with the man she loved. And the seance is taking place on a stage of a building where he had actually performed years ago that's turned into a radio stage. And there's a guy like Walter Winchell who's going to exploit the fuck out of her and try and trick her into believing he's come back. And he died on Halloween, which is at 52, which is always like a deck of cards. And I thought, well, this is an amazing set of circumstances. If I use the bookends and visit the seance through the storytelling, I can jump to different parts of their lives. And I wanted to tell a love story. And I wanted to tell a love story where the dreams of this woman was that they were going to live forever together and have everything. But he kept looking for more. And she kept realizing that he needed to keep performing and doing dangerous things because he needed the love of larger groups of people. And I wrote her a line which was, I could clap till my hands bled, Harry, and it wouldn't be enough. And so this was another one of these passion things. And it wrote itself. I wrote it in 3 weeks as a Broadway musical. Going back to poetry I wrote when I was 17 and trying to fit it in as musical songs and things. And actually managed to get it around Broadway a little bit and got a couple of people reading and things. And then it just didn't work out. When I finished Moll Flanders, I thought, what do I want to do? And I thought, I really would like to do Houdini. And I had tried to get other people, by the way, to write my Broadway musical before I actually ended up writing it, because I was sure I wasn't any good at writing it. And so when I was touring, taking Moll around to be reviewed in various cities, I would walk out into the lobby of the theater and start rewriting my Broadway musical into a movie. And I would sit there in a fit of passion, dreaming, being transported into Houdini world and taking out the songs and adding descriptions and structures and things to make it work as a feature and breaking it out. And when I finished, I gave the script to my agent, who was a guy called David Wirtschafter. And David reads it and he says, "This is awful. Don't show it to anybody."
Oh, goodness gracious.
So I want to share this stuff because, it's so important that I don't look so special, blunder on. So what didn't work? Why doesn't it work? Went back in and came almost close to getting it. There was two people running Fox Classics that loved it, and they were taking it to Bill Mechanic, who was then president of Fox, trying to convince him he should make the movie with me. And Bill said, "Nah, I don't know how to sell it. It's a great script, but I don't know how to sell it." So we spent $20,000 and had posters made. And I took him 10 posters and showed him how to sell it. And he was willing to meet with me. He loves me. He was a lovely guy. But no, I still don't get it. So John, again, thank you, John, had done a movie with TNT called The Buffalo Soldiers. And it was about the Buffalo Soldiers who refused to kill Indians. And Danny Glover was one of the stars of it. And it's a beautiful film. Yeah. And so he said, let's send it to TNT. And I said, "Oh, no, man, they're going to chop it up in little pieces. They're going to tell me I have to linearize the story. And they're going to, I was bleeding before I was wounded, as the old story goes." And so we sent it off, and I get a phone call back from the president, who's a woman of the network. And she says, "Could we meet? Because there's a couple of things I'd like to discuss with you about the script. I'm interested." And I'm going, "Oh, she's going to tell me all of and so I go and sit with her, and she says, "I don't think you have enough of Bess in the montages." And I'm waiting for the next thing. "That's it?" "Yeah." And she's right. I'm thinking like a man. I've not put my female characters much present. I could definitely do that. And they gave me $7 million, not a penny more. You can shoot it wherever you want, but you cannot go over budget. And they also wanted it shot on film, which I thought was phenomenal. Yeah. So ended up shooting it on film, ended up working with Jonathan Sheck, and I went through a whole bunch of actors, and I was not finding my Houdini. And we're getting down, you know how that old ticker close down, close and close to production, and Jonathan ends up being brought in by one of the people from TNT, who's a casting lady, who's a real sharp lady, and lovable person. And he comes in and he says, I'm a little under the weather. Starts to reads one line, and says, I'm just not going to do this. I'm feeling sick. I'm not going to do it. And leaves. And he's my Houdini. I know it. And I'm going, I got to get back to him. So I said, I've got to meet with you. And I took him to lunch. And I said, I want you to do something for me. I want you to read some more because I'm not going to take any more. But we're sitting at a lunch table. And he starts reading. And I go, yeah, you're in. Because I just knew. And he is passionate. He's physical. He's incredibly prepared. He can carry the performance of a man who is famous for century. And so I knew I had my Houdini. I fell in love with Stacey Edwards, who makes me cry every time I see the death scene in that movie where Houdini is passing away. She gave me everything. Mark Ruffalo was suggested to be Houdini's brother, which was an insanely great suggestion. And at the same time, I said, I want to see the two guys work together. And Mark Ruffalo's agent was very angry with me. I said, I only get to make movies once in a while, and I'm not going to make a movie where I don't commit to everything. That you want your actor to know they're wanted and they're going to be great. And that's all I want to make sure of. They get together. Jonathan and Mark are absolutely fantastic, bouncing off each other, lots of great energy, fun. So, I knew it worked and I was great. And then they told me that they wanted Paul Sorvino to play the Walter Winchell character. And I'd read about Paul, and Paul had a reputation for not suffering fools. And I feel like a fool frequently. So, and we're going to shoot the sequences in the seance. And I go to him and I say, honestly, this is a passion piece for me. I love this piece. If there's anything I can do to help you get the best performance out of you, let me know. And we start shooting, and I'm watching on the monitor, and I'm not seeing what I want. And I know from the past, if you don't see it, it ain't there. So I go over to him and I whisper. I always whisper to my actors. I don't want the others to know what's going on. I say, I'm not feeling it. He says, sit under the camera. Okay, I'll do that. I sit under the camera. He does the same thing again. He said, I'm going to repeat it. And it's perfect.
Wow.
I'm not seeing the micro expressions.
Right.
And way back, I worked with Marshall McLuhan. And Marshall McLuhan had said, watch an audience in a movie theater. They're in a trance, and they're moving their faces with the characters' expressions on the screen. And it's something biological. Babies mimic the mouth movements of people that are around them from the time they're born. And we are a pack animal, and it's a form of telepathy. What's going on is if you're not moving your mouth movements when you're watching a performance, we call that bad acting, because it's not touching you. Right. So what I gained from Paul was that this, it was what I instinctively knew, but I didn't know quite, because I was able to get a much clearer thing. So frequently I will now not watch the monitor, because the screen blows everything up immensely, and the monitor you may well be asking for more than is actually as intimate as it could be. So, right. And ended up, again, that's the usual thing you go through. I had, in order to get this movie done, we had done the Magnificent Seven TV series. John and I loved the Magnificent Seven, and we talked CBS into putting it on the air. We did 23 episodes, and we took our crew from the TV show, who were used to shooting an hour and 8 days, and we gave them 30 days to shoot Houdini. So instead of using a feature crew, we used guys that thought 30 days was a freaking luxury.
Yeah.
They were there for me all the way. So I had tremendous backup. And shooting in 6 weeks, we were shooting an hour and a half, and that would have normally freaked me out. But it actually, with these guys, that was easy to pull off. And then we had just, again, I believe in giving people goals and then finding the best way to get from them their best ideas, so that it's like you're saying, can you beat that? If you can't beat it, then well this will do. But I also learned, again, as a director, always ask for something you think could have complications to be shown to you 2 weeks before you shoot it. So in Moll Flanders, there's a sequence where she's driving to the docks, and she's being taken in absolute depression. She's being literally kidnapped away, and she looks out, she sees a dying horse in the road with its owner crying. And I wanted this, and because it symbolized her life, the crush of her life, and the failure of it. And there's a thing called a falling horse, which is horses that are trained to be able to lay down. I demanded to see it 2 weeks before we shot. We had a storm sequence where we were going to build, and I literally built, I spent 90,000 Irish pounds building a pool so we could have a storm sequence with waves created in it and storms and things. And the Irish guys claimed they could do it, but they couldn't. And so we had to bring in Irish people. But I had 2 weeks to get my shit together and to save it. And I say, shooting a movie is solving a million problems.
Yes.
And I go on set and I say, give me more problems. I got to get through this. You know?
Right.
So Moll ended up with a wonderful editing team. The movie was brought to a higher level because of other people's production help. The costumer was brilliant. The makeup lady, whose name escapes me now, just recently passed away, was Irish, and I always hire makeup people who I can communicate really well with, because they're the first people to get my actors in the morning, and they can tell me if there's things that are bugging them. They can be my therapist. They can help me solve problems before they become bigger problems. They can tip me off and say, somebody, made her wait for the car to drive home and she missed something. It's like you can go in by looking at your team. I say casting my crew. That's how you end up making movies that work. Moll ended up, I made a deal with myself. If I didn't make this into a movie that felt like a film worthy of the business, and I had managed to once spend a weekend with David Lean. He was showing his movies at the AFI, and while he was introducing each film, he'd go sit in the lobby. So a few of us figured that out and went and sat with him for 2 days. And I'm going, and I'm not fucking David Lean, so, but if I don't equip myself as really making a film worthy of the film business, I'm going to shut up and never direct again. Yeah. And when we finished this movie, with all the help and support that I got, great score, wonderful effort from all the actors, and I ended up deciding, went to Frank Mancuso and said, could I put my mother's name on it and dedicate it to her, because it was that special to me. Yeah. And that when I was making Moll, John Watson said to me, how come none of your characters have mothers? And I go, Robin Hood, no mother. Right. Moll Flanders, her mother dies, she loses her own child, it's a reunion. And somebody also said to me, I love reading your scripts because I cry at the end for joy when people reunite. And I realized that when you surrender to the flow of your inner unconsciousness, your shamanistic thing, what you're bringing to your tribe is the pain and the problems and the things that you have struggled with, and turning it into dreams that other people can feel. And I have been doing that with my work, not realizing that I had done that. And that was part of the passion. When you surrender, you're bringing these things, your zeitgeist, your things that are the life force that's in you that you weren't aware of. And when you try and write against your nature, you're not bringing those things. And that's what enabled me to go fight for these movies, because each of them said something. And I think Houdini speaks to my wife, because I'm so grateful that she tolerated me constantly gambling. I've not held a decent job since I was 22. Everything I've done is like own a company and constantly gambling, running out of money. I have to go do something. And, she's tolerated that. And I say jokingly, I'm so glad she kept me. And when we started our company, it was I formed this home for rented a large house and rented out rooms to all kinds of filmmakers, and we ended up that her salary was keeping us going at times.
Mm.
So so I'm very lucky and gifted that I found somebody who would tolerate this wayward adventure.
I know something a little bit about that.
Yeah.
I certainly do. So that's a wonderful symmetry that Stockard Channing was your stepmother, and the movie was dedicated to your mother. That's a wonderful symmetry. Houdini's relationship with his mother was incredibly complex, and
Yes.
sent him. It was his, as I understand it, it was his desperation to contact with her and being taken that made him such a zealot about exposing the frauds.
It, it was my reading of it that the disappointment of not being able to communicate with his mother, who he had his childhood stolen from him when his father died, who was a rabbi, and he was like 13 and forced to be the man of the family. And my supposition was, and again, this is poetic, because I really wanted to make a poetic movie, emotional movie, and the process was that she left him feeling incomplete, and he needed her. And when he discovered that the people were using tricks, he was so angry that he decided to uncover all of the frauds and the psychics and debunk them and punish them for the anger that he had. A couple of things. One of them was when I was writing when the idea really came to me of putting this on a stage and using the seance as its functional thing. I had this vision because when they met, Bess and Harry, at this teenagers, he bought a ring for her within a day, and he had the word "believe" carved inside the ring. And I wanted her to arrive, and everybody was supposed to bring for the psychic, the woman who was Rhea Perlman, who again people, great actors to play smaller roles for me, because there's no small role. Everybody was asked to bring a memento from his life, and she'd forgotten. And so she decides to take off her wedding ring and put it on the seance table. And I also, because I don't want people to know whether they're inside Bessie's head, whether it's a dream, or whether it's a romantic fantasy, or whether Houdini's actually there, which some people welcome. If you believe in spirits, that's fine with me. So he's watching this seance, and he's come there to prove that he's the biggest thing, that he can beat God, and that he's going to show the world by coming back at this seance that he's the most incredible, egotistically powerful person. And he watches, and he sees what might be the seance is towards the end, the psychic's getting all excited and feeding things, and then Harry's brother, who's present at the seance, reveals that the psychic has tricked her, that she's been gotten drunk, she had found clues from her, and that she's been being defrauded and being used. And the seance collapses, and everybody leaves, and Harry's left on the stage. And what he realizes is that more important than showing God was that he wished he could comfort his wife.
Right.
And
that's beautiful.
She comes back on the stage, and she's forgotten her ring, and she won't leave without it. So she sits down, dabs her eyes, puts the ring on, starts to leave, and Harry calls to her, and she keeps going. And he calls to her again and says, Bess, what's inside the ring? And she keeps going, and then she slows down. He says, does it matter whether I'm imagining you or you're imagining me? What's inside the ring? Believe. And then they see each other and they embrace, and only those people know that happened. And that was why I had to write the musical. That ending, another ending that was so emotionally powerful to me, that made me cry, made me go through the entire process to get to that again.
Right. It's a gorgeous scene, and it was done beautifully in the private moment. And well, Pen, we have talked away an hour and 40 minutes of our life, and I could just talk to you forever. You're so gracious, so clearly passionate about what you do.
Can I say something?
Thank you so much. Yeah, please do.
I am so impressed with you. As I said, I watched your show the other day when you were just extemporaneously talking about things and your take on things, your understanding of story, your passion, your humor, your warmth. I just want to recommend to people who are watching you, you really are the authentic thing. I've got to now share with you two of these discussions. You get it. You get it in levels that I don't see a lot of people get. Some of us are very lucky, and some of us are gifted, and you are gifted. And I love that you want to share it, because I really want to encourage people to take on their goals, to invent their futures, and not be too scared to fail a little bit, because that's how you learn. And you're doing the same thing, and I want to salute you for that. We're both trying to make other people who are creative less vulnerable, less aware of imposter syndrome, and realize that this is just the norms of our business. We have chosen to do things that are really extraordinary, and we must reward ourselves. And you're helping people discover that, and you empower that.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll tell you what, let's end on that. Everyone have a wonderful night. We did not get a chance to go through your photographs again, so folks, watch the first episode and go ahead and do that. And Pen, thank you again so much.
They can always go to pendenshamphotography.com if they want to see photos.
Excellent. All right, folks, now you know it. All right, have a good night, everyone. Take care. I'll see you next week, where I will be talking about the art of writing fantasy novels, knights, dragons, heroes. We could all use a little of that.